This is Sarah's Country. And our next topic, I am always following how much we're putting into our agricultural science. There is the Sustainable Farming Future Fund, the SFFF, which is a lot of Fs, supports applied research and projects led by farmers and growers, foresters, as well as MPI, the Ministry for Primary Industries, to support and enhance our natural resources like water and soil, and to encourage research into innovation in areas such as climate change and fisheries management. I asked our 5 political agricultural spokespeople, how would your party support our innovators to commercialise our science technology globally?
Well, the $40 million fund that's SFFF is available for farmers and people involved with agribusiness to be at the leading edge of innovation. We don't want to pay that money out just for business as usual. There are lots of people with great ideas out there, and that fund is available for them to apply. All primary sectors are able to access that, and so we've been encouraging people as we go around the country to apply for SFFF to complement what the money that's going on in other parts of the economy through the CRIs, through the universities. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars literally in the area of primary production. And we've seen it, this money going into fishing, a lot into forestry. We need to better understand our soil and our water management. And so where we've had good research and development in the past, sometimes that knowledge has been kind of thrown to the winds. We haven't been able to gather it. And one of the commitments around our extension services from MPI's perspective is to gather that information in one place, make it readily available for both farm advisors and for farmers. So that way we'll get best practice out on farm through online, of course, which is the new way, but through discussion groups, and as we've seen in the past.
David Bennett from the National Party.
Well, I think it's a delicate balance there as well. We want to have the best science and technology in New Zealand, and at the same time, we also want to protect that science and technology from our competitors. And so there is an element of balancing that, and that's why we have trademarks and patents and things like that, so people can keep their technology and get the rights to it. But fundamentally, we are in an open world, and we use other countries' technology to our advantage, and they will use ours as well. And there's a huge agri-tech business that's out there. You just have to look at my hometown of Hamilton with Gallagher's, a fundamental New Zealand business that's grown out of the agri sector and now is a conglomerate around the world. And so we've got a very strong tech policy that's looking at having a Ministry of Technology, scholarships, a particular visa around that area, and to encourage people into those STEM subjects. But we also want to work with the Agri-tech transformation plan. So they released that earlier this year, and that's a really strong plan by the sector around how they want to grow and make sure they can use more of the robotics, the artificial intelligence, and the technology that's becoming available on farms. So we see a dual process there, our tech plan, plus also the agri-tech sector's transformation plan. If we work those two together, we should be able to give the resourcing and also the leadership to enable us to continue to have the best technology on farm in New Zealand, but also to be world leaders in that area as well.
Eugenie Sage from the Green Party.
Well, the Greens believe that it's not just a focus on these funds to promote innovation. We think you need to do some more research on natural systems so that there's a better understanding of the changes that we make in land management and what impacts they have on waterways, for example. So I think previously the fund has over-focused on innovation and not enough on just a better understanding of natural systems, what we can do to sequester more carbon, what we can do to have healthier soils, better mycorrhiza and other microorganisms. But in terms of innovation, I know in the predator-free space, where this government has invested substantially, with the Greens at the heart of it, to landscape scale predator control to meet that predator-free 2050 vision, and that has major benefits not just for conservation but also for farmers in terms of possum control, assisting with bovine TB. And internationally, a lot of countries are now watching what we're doing with rats, with possums and other predators, and there's been opportunities for exports of innovation like the self-resetting traps. So that's an area where I think we are being looked at internationally and quite a potential for selling these products to the world.
Mark Cameron from the ACT Party.
A couple of realities with scientific research and R&D. The ACT Party would firstly, repeal the GE laws, because quite often there's a lot of technology locked up outside of New Zealand abroad that can mitigate a lot of the necessary difficulties we're having, especially if you're talking about, say, grass cultivars and new hybrid technology in that arena when it comes to herbages that reduce the amount of methane and necessarily reduce the amount of CO2. The GE framework doesn't allow for that. The ACT Party does not believe that government should go off on big subsidisations and or fundings of these sort of realities. There's a deep grievance that there is the potentiality that you end in a political football between who can lobby the government the most for funding. But what we will do absolutely is promote industry driving its own initiatives and get a lot of the red tape and compliance that stops a lot of that out of the way.
Mark Patterson from the New Zealand First Party.
Well, yeah, and as I said in the previous answer, there's a lot of stuff going on in the field of methane mitigation research and all that stuff needs to have. Just need to throw the kitchen sink at funding. Actually, the funding model for agricultural science needs overhauled. It's very clunky at the moment. It needs longer, more secure timelines for the scientists to be able to properly execute sort of blue skies planning and research. So that's probably the main area we would like to see change. But we look at the R&D tax credits that we've done, Callaghan Innovation, which we're right behind, the Provincial Growth Fund, which has got in behind things like the red seaweed. There's a number of areas, but I think the funding shouldn't be a problem. We need to fund these things, but I think more broadly, it is the model of agricultural research funding that is very clunky. The scientists are telling me it's very difficult to navigate. They're spending too much time on application and not enough time on research. So that's a key area of change we'd like to see. Ag-tech has been signalled by this government as a key area the previous government is a key area that wanted support. We were right behind that. It's a massive area of opportunity for us, and it's just a no-brainer that we should leverage that for international export revenue.
This is Sarah's Country. The question was, how would your party support our innovators to commercialise science technology globally? And our expert commentator joining us tonight on Sarah's Country's election special is Professor Rich McDowell, who is not only the AgResearch principal scientist, but also the chief scientist for the Our Land and Water National Science Challenge. And he joins us now. Good evening, Rich.
Pleasure to be here again.
Oh, it's wonderful having you on the show, as always. And I couldn't think of a better person who would be able to give us an all-encompassing overview on funding science, agricultural science in this country, but also in terms of commercialising. I know AgResearch has a huge focus on New Zealand. Let's kick off with what we just heard there from Mark Patterson from New Zealand First. He said that they would throw the entire kitchen sink at funding, absolutely overhaul the process, which is being described as clunky, and supporting more blue sky science. Is he correct? Is our funding of agricultural science clunky and need overhauled?
Well, any system has its foibles, and I guess it's certainly true that we do spend an awful lot of time preparing proposals, but sometimes that's for good reason, to ensure that there's good quality science being done. And I was interested to hear, I guess, the comments, not only from him, but I guess from a couple of others there around underpinning or blue sky science, as you could say. And sometimes that can lead to unexpected discoveries, and it's also fun. But that can also lead to quite a long time in terms of getting it out there and getting it adopted. So I do think that there is a role, I guess, for government and funding agencies, I guess, to set goals. It often focuses the mind, I guess, of us researchers. But, that's just my opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion of any of the organisations that either I work in or represent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we did want you on the show, of course, for your personal opinion, and you've been in the game long enough. And Damien O'Connor said that sometimes it's more about the knowledge not being gathered in one place and make it readily available for extension of best practice on farm. What sort of things did the Our Land and Water Science Challenge come out with to support the direction of this current coalition government's focus?
Well, I guess I'll draw back to the question, and it was a little bit longer than just funding the science and as it was commercialising it. And I think he was talking about the Sustainable Food and Fibre Futures Fund. A lot of S there, aren't there? Or SFFF. And I took note on that one because it's been around for 20 years. That's about as long as I've been involved in science in New Zealand anyway. And it's been around because it works. It joins together science and joins them with farmers for good practical solutions that are either now or in the future, kind of ahead of the time. And it struck me, there are many examples of, success stories with, I guess, SFFF, but one that I guess I was involved in maybe in the late 2000s or early 2010s was with the dairy industry. And I guess they were ahead of the time because they came up with their sustainable land care manual, and they always have awards where they celebrate not only success in profitability but also environmental performance. That's continued to this day, I guess, and I guess under the current policy regime, they've set themselves up for probably good workable farm plans, which you could argue also helps them protect market access, especially when you consider, I guess we supply the majority of the world's venison trade.
And lastly, Rich, we have some coalescing opposing sides, as you would probably predict, between the Greens and ACT, and Greens supporting not commercialising our innovation as much as actually science that is about our natural systems, how to sequester carbon. ACT straight in there off the bat talking about supporting gene editing 100% and getting red tape and compliance out of the way. How does science choose exactly what projects it does throw behind? Is it who is in power at the time in terms of what you study and scientifically, or is that regardless of the government at the time?
Yeah, well, it's a mixed bag. And so there's, I mentioned blue skies. We call that kind of discovery, ground up science. And then there's also very applied, which is, quite focused. And that's where you partner with industry for a specific target in mind. Often it's the latter, which you can see as more commercializable, but, taking in mind that blue skies does produce stuff. But I was reasonably impressed that all the politicians had awareness of not only the benefits of agricultural science but also technology. And I think there was also comment not only about us being a lucky country, but also being quite a varied country. And our uniqueness is not only our advantage, but also our disadvantage in some cases, and that we've got to understand that variation in not only our climate and soils, but also connect them to our can-do attitude, such that we can tailor, I guess, not only products, but also practices that work from Northland to Southland.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. Our expert commentator on this particular question, that is Principal Scientist for AgResearch and the Chief Scientist behind the Our Land and Water National Science Challenge, Rich McDowell. It's always a pleasure having Rich on Sarah's Country as a regular on an ongoing basis.